The Supreme Court has made a decision to temporarily block the Trump administration from using the Alien Enemies Act for deportation. Tyrone Bowman live. In a brief order, according to NPR, in a brief order, the court directed the Trump administration not to remove Venezuelans held in the Blue Bonnet Detention Center in Texas, quote, until further order of this court, end quote. The Supreme Court temporarily blocked the Trump administration from deporting any Venezuelans held in the Blue Bonnet Detention Center in West Central Texas. Under the Alien Enemies Act, a rarely used 18th century wartime law that allows for accelerated removal of foreigners deemed a threat by authorities. Quote, the government is directed not to remove any member of the putative class of detainees from the United States until further order of this court, the court said in a brief early Saturday, wrote Justices Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito. They dissented. They did not join in this order. The American Civil Liberties Union late Friday had warned that immigration authorities were moving to quickly restart removals under the Alien Enemies Act, despite the previous Supreme Court's restrictions on how it can use the act. Late Thursday, a group of Venezuelans detained at the Blue Bonnet Detention Center was advised that they would be immediately deported. ACLU lawyer Lee Generant told NPR that migrants at the Anson, Texas facility were being loaded onto buses for removal late Friday. This came despite a recent U.S. Supreme Court ruling that found the Trump administration could continue deporting under the act only if detainees are given due process to challenge their removal. The government says 137 migrants accused of being members of the Venezuelan gang Tren de Agua, including a group of men sent to a prison in El Salvador, have already been deported under the Alien Enemies Act. NPR was unable to independently confirm the number of people who may be deported from the Bluebonnet detention facility. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security declined to provide details or answer additional questions about the case. There is something more sinister going on here, ladies and gentlemen. See, a lot of this is all smoke and mirrors that's being played out before the public. And this is psychological warfare to keep people in balance. It's almost like the Pied Piper is doing different things. And meanwhile, while people are focused on what they're doing with their left hand, they're doing something else with their right hand. This is why people must pay attention to what's really happening and what's really going on. Because many times what you think is happening is not actually happening. There are diversionary tactics that are being used. There are psychological warfare tactics that are being used. There are mind games that are being played, and people are being duped. They're being lied to. They are purposefully being misled and misguided. And on this program right here, what I do, I bring events before you. And I read the articles and I put all the citations up on the screen, but at the same time, I break it down so that people can be well informed as to what's happening and as to what's going on. A lot of folks don't like being woke. They don't like the term woke. That's why they don't like the term called, they call it critical race theory. They don't like the term that Black people are awoke. Well, we're awakened and we're not going back to sleep. You can try to delete us from every book that you want to, but you cannot change the stipulated fact that Africans were brought from the shores of Africa and they were enslaved for almost 400 years in this nation. The Holocaust occurred. Nobody disputes that the Holocaust occurred. Nobody disputes the atrocities and the disgusting things that Hitler did. No one disputes it. And it shouldn't be disputed because they're verified facts. Well, similarly, you cannot dispute that slavery existed here in the United States of America. Bottom line. You can't dispute the fact that Jim Crow, the KKK, segregation existed. You can't dispute the fact that the Great Migration happened from the Deep South. Over 100 million Black people left the cotton fields from the Deep South because of what was happening down there. And I know people who are still alive today. They're well advanced in years. They remember the horrors of that period, and they're trying to forget it. Many of them don't want to reminisce and even talk about it. But I told them for historical purposes, you have to talk about it. Because if you try to erase history even from verbal language, then it's almost like it didn't happen. So let's get back to this article. So don't be deceived. Quote, we are not going to reveal the details of counterterrorism operations, and we are complying with the Supreme Court's ruling, said Assistant Secretary of Homeland Security Trisika McLaughlin. The ACLU late Friday has asked the Supreme Court for an emergency injunction and stay of removal. The group asked that migrants being subjected to the Alien Enemies Act be given at least 30 days advance notice. Quote, the notice the government is providing does not remotely comply with the Supreme Court's order, the ACLU argued in the request for an injunction. At a minimum, the notice must be translated into a language that individuals can understand. Most importantly, there must be sufficient time for individuals to seek review, as during World War II. That notice must be at least 30 days in advance of any attempted removal, end quote. The group also unsuccessfully asked a federal judge to halt any new deportations. At an emergency hearing Friday evening, federal Judge James Boasberg seemed to agree the forms migrants were asked to sign regarding the act had no information regarding their right to contest and were inadequate. Quote, it doesn't say you have the right to contest. You have the right to challenge anything. It's just telling you here's the notice. You're getting removed. Boasberg told Justice Department Attorney Drew Ensign that certainly seems problematic to me, end quote. The Justice Department argued that the notice complies with the previous Supreme Court guidance on the issue. Federal judges in several districts have blocked the deportation of people using the Alien Enemies Act. The ACLU sued the administration again this week in order to block deportations at several additional Texas detention centers, including Bluebonnet, a facility in west central Texas, about halfway between Lubbock and Fort Worth. The ACLU alleges that in recent days, many Venezuelan migrants were specifically brought to Bluebonnets for that reason. The government denies this. Boasberg earlier this week found probable cause that the Trump administration committed criminal contempt by disobeying his ruling, only to see the Supreme Court rule that only judges where migrants are being held have jurisdiction to halt their removal. Let me leave you with this. It's called Prisoners for Profit, the Prison Industrial Complex. Tyrone Bowman, never surrender, never quit.